Greetings, everyone, and welcome to another episode of Teacher Talks. My name is Christopher Hansen. I have the privilege of serving my community as the Director of Music Education and Orchestral Activities at Seattle Pacific University. Today, I am joined with a friend and colleague that I met over almost 3 years ago now, actually almost 3 years ago in the Netherlands, of all places, at an extraordinary workshop. This is Dr. Nikoletta, and I practice the pronunciation. I want to get it right. Polydorou.
Ru.
Polydorou. So she is helping me because, as she admits, Greek is hard. And so this is such an amazing opportunity to connect with someone on the other side of the world. In fact, I'm very grateful because it is now 10 o'clock in Cyprus, correct? Oh, my goodness. So I'm very grateful for her time, her energy and passion and enthusiasm for music and how that transforms our lives as human beings. She is the co-founder and executive director of Systema Cyprus, which is now in its third year, and she'll be telling us a little bit about her program and the work that she does. But again, when we first met, it was through this mutual understanding that the arts can transform our lives, and that is really the whole driving force behind these Teacher Talks. As some of you already know, but for those that might be joining for the first time, Teacher Talks is an opportunity to connect with others, but specifically geared towards the students that I get to serve at SPU. It's sponsored by a student organization called the Falcon Feathers, which stands for Future Educators in the Arts, Transforming Human Experience and Realities. So these are all different types of art backgrounds that come together to talk about how significant the arts are and realizing our connection with each other as human beings, our connection across the world through the arts and with the arts. So this has provided a great platform to just engage people in a lot of different areas. Admittedly, it's been slightly biased towards music because I'm a music educator. And so I do this kind of work in my own field. And I have seen through professional and personal connections all over the world how impactful music can be in building community and establishing relationships. And so Nikoletta today is going to, again, talk about the work that she's doing in Cyprus and give us a window into her career and some of the things that she's doing. But I hope in this conversation, even though you see two people on the screen, that you will participate. I'd encourage you to pop in questions or comments that you might have while we're talking, and I'll be able to see those. We're streaming this on YouTube and on Facebook. So add your comments or questions that you might have, and know that the two people on the screen that are talking is just the beginning of this conversation. So if you see opportunities in your community to either establish a community music program or expand the work that you're doing to include the arts, I want to encourage you to do that and think about those possibilities today as we're talking. Seattle Pacific University is a Christian higher education institution. I feel very privileged to work there. And so I'd like to start these Teacher Talks with just a brief moment of prayer and reflection. Whatever prayer means to you, however you practice it, this is just an opportunity to ground ourselves. So I'd love to just ask you to take a moment, reflect on these opportunities that we have to connect through the arts, and let us just lift up that moment together. Lord, thank you for this time. Thank you for the technology and the opportunities to stay connected. God, as we continue to distance ourselves physically to protect our health, we pray that we do not distance ourselves intellectually, emotionally, and spiritually. Help us to facilitate more conversations like the one we will have today, to truly appreciate what the arts can do in our lives to transform the human experience. Thank you for Nikoletta and the incredible work that she's doing with Systema Cyprus. God, I thank you for this time again. Bless this technology, make this connection strong so that we can inspire other conversations and other opportunities to connect through the arts. In Jesus' name, amen. So Nikoletta, again, thank you for being here. And I'd love for you to tell people that are watching just more about yourself and what you're doing and what's happening in Cyprus.
Thank you, and it's really wonderful, Christopher, to see you after 3 years of meeting you in this wonderful opportunity that we had back then in the Netherlands. So yeah, you see now two people in the US and in Cyprus, in the Mediterranean. So I am a musician, and I have trouble of saying what I am because I studied choir conducting at first, then I continued with music education, but I never felt that I am a choir conductor or that I am a music educator. And 10 years ago, back in 2010 it was, when I finished my studies and I was back in Cyprus, I started teaching in one school through a program from the Ministry of Education here in Cyprus. That the program was for social inclusion, for in schools that are in zones of priority, as they were saying. I didn't know so much about it, so I went to a school that the vast majority were children with migrants and refugees. So it was something that changed my life, and I have been teaching in this area for the past 10 years. And slowly, I realized that this is who I am. I don't know if I can call myself a community music educator or a social music educator, but for sure it's not just a music educator. That's not who I am. So after 7 years that I've been in this school, after 6 years, because it was when I had the inspiration, I was feeling that I want to do something for these children that changed my life. I wanted to offer something back to them because I literally saw life differently through them. And they taught me how to have a really different perspective about life when you don't have everything ready in your life, when you have to fight for what you have, when the respect, how to respect people, and things that I've never thought before, really. I've never thought before. So as a musician, I started seeing what programs could be beneficial for the children, because you understand that when you have many children that are migrants and refugees, even though they speak Greek, there is a problem of communication if we think in a way that Greek is not their first language, and sometimes even their language they don't develop it in a way that is their first language. So we have children that they don't actually have a first language. So music was a perfect way, and they were all very talented, extremely talented. So I was exploring what projects can be beneficial for them. And after reviewing many projects, I decided to start an El Sistema inspired program that I'm sure that you are familiar with. But the beauty of El Sistema is that it can be adjusted to every neighborhood. Every program is different. So, and it's based on the needs of the children, on how many hours, in how many students you will have in groups, and everything. So we established Sistema Cyprus back in 2018, and we offer free music education to children and young people in Cyprus, including, of course, as I said, migrants, refugees, and in generally children with less opportunities. Through that journey, we accomplished a lot, and what I can say is that we built a family. This is what we all feel, and we engaged the parents in a great way, and we also engaged many people. So to go back to what we do, we operate in two cities, in Nicosia and Larnaca. In Nicosia, we have a string and percussion orchestra. And in Larnaca, we started this year with a wind orchestra. So the idea is to bring them together. You know, in Cyprus, we are a very small island and we are only 30 minutes apart. So at some point, and when the situations allow, we will be a symphony orchestra all together. And we also operate in 2 shelters of unaccompanied refugee minors, where we run community music workshops. And many times, boys from shelters also join the orchestra. So the children, the way that it works, they get an instrument from us for free. They can take it home. We have in Nicosia, we have, as I said, all the string instruments, violins, violas, cellos, double basses, and percussion. So every kid gets an instrument. They participate 5 hours per week. They are at Sistema, so 3 hours for lessons, 1 hour and a half for orchestra rehearsal, and half hour for theory lesson. So
Now, is that 5 hours over the whole week, or is
yes.
that?
Yes,
Okay.
yes, they come for 3 days.
Wow.
For example. And we also have the option of the choir, especially for 2 reasons we created the choir. For the children who had the need to be more hours with us, so to have a 4th day to be there, and also for the children who are waiting to enter the orchestra until we are able to start a second orchestra. So what else I wanted to say that is very important is, you know, in Cyprus, in generally, arts are very underestimated. So you can imagine how difficult it was to find the instruments and find the funding and the space. So I want to say that, of course, that we have the support of the Nicosia municipality that gave us the space in Nicosia, and in Larnaca, the Larnaca Cultural Foundation. And what we did with the instruments is that we ran a campaign for second-hand instruments, and we got all the instruments that we needed, or all of our needs, in violins, and we also got some cellos. You understand that the people who had their old violin or smaller size violin, they just gave it to us, and they also wrote a dedication in the cases, so the kids have the violins and they know from where they came from. And then, of course, we needed to find a sponsor for the rest of the instruments, the string instruments. That was Yannis Christodoulou Foundation, that is based in the UK. And actually, this year they also bought for us all our needs in percussion instruments: timpani, marimba, xylophone, glockenspiel. And in Larnaca, we did the same this year when we started. We did a campaign that we received many flutes, clarinets, saxophones, trumpets, and the US Embassy bought us the rest of the wind instruments. So we did it in this way, and believe me, there are kids that they know, like they say the name of who gave them the instrument, and this engaged the community in a great way in what we do, and they will come to the concerts. They will know in many occasions the kid who has the instrument that they gave, and it was really a very, very nice way to engage the community in this way, and we received love from the community immediately. And also, what I would like to say is that we have more than 100 volunteers that in different, like, we have many musicians, volunteers that help with the orchestra rehearsals, that come to the shelters for the community music workshops. We also have volunteers that help in concerts. We have a film director, videographers, photographers, in media, graphic designer. He's amazing, and he sent us work to convince us to to be our volunteer when we started collaborating with him. And it's a big group, and also the parents are actively involved in what we do. And this year we achieved to have, starting from last year, we achieved to have collaborations with 3 universities that we signed memorandums of understanding. That one of the things that it's in these memorandums is that they give the opportunity for academic scholarships for our students when they finish high school, and we already have 1 student studying at the university.
This is amazing. I put in the chat the website, sistemacyprus.com. So people can go and see some of the things that you're doing. How many students do you have between the 2 cities now?
Yeah, we have 200.
Wow.
200 students. We started with 50, and we are in the 65 with Larnaca, and now we have 200, including the shelters.
God, there were so many things that you said that I started. Forgive me, I started writing stuff down because I didn't want to miss it. I love one of the first things you said, that I saw life differently through them. And this is something I think in general, if I could be so bold, because I don't want to sound judgmental, but having taught music in public schools in the United States, and I ran a nonprofit orchestra, community orchestra, where I lived in Central Texas, I think that we often lose sight of the opportunity we have to learn through our students and to better understand our world through making music with other people. And I'm curious, the way you talked about building the program, and correct me if I'm wrong, it doesn't sound like music has ever been the goal. The goal is to put on this concert, which I feel like when I was teaching in Central Texas, I would get confused by that. Is that my goal was, I'm going to get all these kids to do this performance. But the way you talk about it, it seems like what happens with the music is sort of secondary to building these relationships. Am I right? Or
yes, you're right. The thing is that music is a tool. Music is the tool, but of course we don't want to force children to be musicians. So music is a tool, but of course there are children who are seeing music more seriously. So the opportunity is there, but music is the tool to what we do. And in our theory, in our way of how we built this, we had some very, very important things that we had to have in mind before we had to build our own theory of change and how we see things. And one very, very important thing is how we see these children. So I would like to discuss that more and tell you. So one of the people that we looked at, it was Maxine Green, and going to the concept of regard, of respecting and recognizing people, but also of Jane Jacobs, American, that not a musician, was an activist and wrote a book back in 1961 about how the roads of New York could have been built in a way that they engage the community in a better way than it was. So when she was talking about slum areas, She was saying that in order to overcome slums, we must regard slum dwellers as people capable of understanding and acting upon their own self-interests, and that we need to respect and recognize the dwellers as human beings and build upon their forces. And also, Jacobs back then, she identified that there was a patronization of people into better life instead of respect and recognition of those same people. And then going to Paulo Freire, that was very important, the pedagogy of the oppressed in his book. He defined the oppressed people as those who are not free and lack the ability to realize themselves as humans. And he distinguished a charitable action that is empty of respect for those who are served by that action, but in opposition to a true act of love that acknowledges the worth of human dignity. And I think that this is what we're discussing at some point in our training back in November about having the savior syndrome if we are feeling that we are above other people. So and if you have that, then you are not able to understand that you can receive from other people. So and then we went to the example of Pablo Casals, the cellist. That's part of what he did when he founded an orchestra in Barcelona in 1920. He came to realize that only the elite would attend his concerts. So he did a great job to find a way not to give concerts as a charity, but to engage the working class, that was his target group back then, to be part of the experience. So based on that, our philosophy is to respect and recognize migrants and marginalized people with true generosity and not charity by including them in the experience.
I love that last, generosity, not charity.
Yeah, it's what we have, and you can see it many times that people speak about the charity, the need to have food, clothes. That of course the need is there, but it's also the feeling of being someone, of having opportunities for something else than that. And there are beautiful people that they just need this opportunity.
Well, and you are, I mean, everything that you're saying resonates with me. This is what I've been using in my own program, because now I teach teachers, and we focus heavily on the work of Maxine Greene. And I'm actually reading through the Pedagogy of Freedom with some of my graduate music teacher candidates. And it's somewhat serendipitous that you mentioned this, because when you were talking about working with your students, and for people that are watching, this probably seems totally staged, and it's not. When you were talking about it, it absolutely reminded me of Freire. And I thought, wow, this sounds a lot like Freire's philosophy about the teacher and the student should be in a mutual design of learning, that you are both learning from each other. And in music pedagogy in general, this, especially when you look at Western European models of music education, it's the opposite. It is the master teacher, right? It is the master performer taking on apprentices to train them in a very specific way. And I love to hear other educators talking about music as a tool. And I use that term very specifically, that I view you as an educator, and it just so happens that you use music to teach people. And our university structure in America is very siloed. It's very structured. And this is one of the things that I talk to my colleagues about, is starting to push against those institutional boundaries and barriers, because I don't want to train music educators. I want to train musicians to be educators. Like they're coming to us as musicians, and I want them to realize the value that they can offer the world as an educator. It just so happens that they teach music. And that idea that I'm going to be an educator, but I'm going to be a music educator, that you segregate yourself into your content, I think you lose the focus, because then your focus becomes music. My goal is to teach music. No, our goal should be to teach human beings, and we're just using music to teach human beings. And it's, again, it gives me goosebumps, because I was just talking to my students about this week, and one of them, he actually has a terminal degree in music, which is very impressive. He has a doctorate of musical arts, very impressive. And it made the decision to start teaching in public school, and has been sort of struggling with balancing content and how they engage the students. And when we read this chapter, it was I think the third chapter from Pedagogy of Freedom, where we're talking about, teaching is not the banking model. Teaching is not you pouring knowledge into students, right? So we're attacking that. And Friede says, you should be learning with your student. And my student just goes, that doesn't make, how can they learn, how could I learn about violin from them? I was like, well, you're not learning violin from them. You're learning about who they are as a human being. You're learning about the world that they experience, that they see. And that was, one of the very first things that you said, that we get to see the world differently with these human beings that we make music with. So you've got me all worked up, because I cannot agree more. I'm curious, are these thinkers that you went to through El Sistema? Were they helping you guide this, or did you guys kind of just explore and kind of come to this on your own?
We explored. I mean, well, I did many steps when I started organizing everything, and I did also an online course about music and social action. So no, it was not guided. Like, it was things that I found, and I read many books and philosophers, and I end up with a list of, and this also something that I mean, what we do with children, I also try to do with the team of Sistema Cyprus. So when I found, in order to come up with the 10 sources that made me conclude, not conclude, but to have my theory of change, then I gave this list. I didn't want to tell the other to the people of the team, the co-founders. I didn't want to tell them what I learned. So I gave them that list, and I told them, yeah, you have to read all of these books. You have to see all of these documentaries. So I wanted them to have their own the freedom of their own understanding, because Sistema Cyprus, it can be, as for the children, it can be perceived in a very different way. I mean, there are children who are there because they really like to get on stage. They don't believe that they have this opportunity to. Of course, if you ask them now what they miss the most during the pandemic, they all answer the rehearsals, not the concerts, the rehearsals. But others say that they miss the teachers. Others say that they miss the lessons. Not so many, but I mean, the most important thing is the rehearsal. So in generally, it's something that as the children develop in a different way, if they are there to develop friendship, to be part of a strong family, if they want to become musicians, if it's different. So also for the team, it can be different. And in the co-founders, it's me, it's Miria, who is in communication and marketing. So we cannot have exactly the same vision, because she does not teach the kids, but she sees it from a very different way. And also a conductor, our previous conductor that now is artistic advisor, also everyone is free to develop the way that they understand it, and this is also about in generally in music. When you go to listen to a concert, to attend a concert, the feelings and what you will receive is different. Every person will receive it in a different way. So this was my way to. I gave them the many sources that they had to develop their own understanding of what is Sistema Cyprus.
I really appreciate that, because this is something, again, I feel like I might be generalizing a bit too much, but I'm speaking from my experience being educated in the United States. This teacher as explicator, this teacher as sort of master in the learning relationship, is something that is far too often perpetuated and celebrated, for that matter, as like, when you have the expert teacher, that relationship is more valuable than another. And I really struggle with that, because even when I was young, I was that kid that always asked why. I was never satisfied with directions, right? Like, we're going to do this now. And I'd raise my hand, well, why? Why do we have to do it that way? Why do we have to do it right now? You can imagine how much my teachers loved me. And I remember sort of challenging that. And so when I decided to transition from teaching grade school in the United States to teaching at the university level, because I wanted to work with future educators, I was very passionate about not telling them what to do. And I was really afraid that I would just, again, perpetuate this cycle of, I'm the one that knows, I have the experience, and I'm going to tell you what I know, and then you're going to take that off to your students. One of the books and authors that sort of transformed me as I was developing my understanding of, as you put it, my understanding of change, my understanding of education, was Jacques Rancière's The Ignorant Schoolmaster. And that book was huge for me, because it was the first time that I read an author directly challenged this system of education that I grew up in, that the teacher is the one that knows everything and you're supposed to learn from them. And he gives this wonderful example of where that system was turned on its head, and he completely challenges this idea that the teacher has to be in charge, and argues the most important thing is a student's curiosity. And he says it in his own way. It's the text is translated from French, so it's kind of clunky. He's a French philosopher and thinker, but he basically says that man is an intelligence served by a will. It believes in a universal intelligence, that all human beings are born intelligent. It challenges the idea of talent, right? That some people can learn and some people can't, or some people are more inept. So I'm reading this and really get into it. And kind of halfway through the book, he says, the most powerful question that a human being can ask is, what do you think? And I remember sitting with it for a long time and thinking, well, how is that the most powerful question? And then as I was teaching, I realized how often the questions that I asked were direct and were content-based. Like, what note do you play on beat 3 of measure 2? And is that a down bow or an up bow? And I was asking students questions that I had the answer to, and that they had to use the knowledge and experiences I provided them to answer. I didn't give them, as you pointed out, this sort of freedom to understand it yourself. And I love that you practice that, not just with your students, but with your staff, because I am recognizing how difficult that is for some people to do, when all they know is a model that promotes the teacher above themselves, where they lose their own sense of agency and freedom to a large extent. And my students at the college level they haven't pushed against it, but they've been confused that, we'll read something and I'll just stand in class and go, well, what did you think? And they just look at me, but aren't you going to tell me what and I was like, no, why would I tell you what to think? I didn't read it the way you did. Like, what do you think about it? And there's just silence, because they're so used to people saying, here, read this, and then I'm going to tell you what you should get out of it. And then I want you to answer specific questions out of the reading. And they lose building their own understanding of it. So I love that you're doing that.
You know, I am teaching also at the university, and this year I have a new course that is pretty much about music and social action, and about artists, musicians, and about music programs. And I started with my students with some theory before we start exploring different projects. And I started with Dewey and Maxime Green, and they were at the beginning they were asking why are are we looking at that, and I was like, try to understand. And at the end I gave them 3 questions for reflection, like, do you consider music as a tool for social change? How do you see music in a democratic country, for example? How do you see that, the role of music? And then they were like, and they, of course, they wanted time to think about it, but it's exactly what you are saying. And I told them that in this lesson, I will not give you information and you will read and you will pass the exam. I will give you the information and then you will reflect. So the answers, whatever, can be different, but it will be you. You will develop your theory, your understanding. So I have this now. Yeah, when I gave them the questions, they were all like, It was weird. It was weird.
Well, it becomes so limiting is what has always bothered me about it, because if we're asking prescribed questions, then that is leading us to prescribed outcomes. That, even now, and this is not just me, I think this is happening all over the world, but particularly in America right now, in the midst of this pandemic, as the role of teachers has changed in public schools and how we facilitate learning, there isn't, and I say this to my students all the time, there is not one way to teach because there is not one way to learn. And the two have to go together. We know there's not one way to learn, so there cannot be one way to teach. So you have to decide, how do you want to teach? How do you want to engage others in learning? And some of my students openly get really frustrated by it, because they go, well, I just want you to tell me what to do. And I was like, but if I tell you what to do, you are going to perpetuate my understanding. That is all that's going to come of it. It's not going to change anything. It's not going to allow you to have control over the situation. You're just going to do what I do. And that's what Freire calls stagnation, right? Like that just what Freire calls it stultification is the fancy term that he uses, where we just stop. Nothing is growing, nothing is changing, because we're just inheriting knowledge from the people that we project to be more learned or wiser or whatever it is. And so it's not because I've had colleagues that have questioned, like, well, you're promoting anarchy, like there has to be structure, there has to be a system. It's like, well, yes, but to what extent? Like, yes, I sort of expect a certain amount of respect from my students because of the experiences that I've had and the position that I hold. Like, I would hope that they would respect my knowledge and experience, and I hope that they believe they could learn from it. But if they disrespect me, if they look at the material that I give them differently, I don't have the right to tell them that they can't learn anymore. That's what I don't understand, are these weird, social and political structures that we create around teaching, right? That, like, if you disrespect your teacher, if you question the teacher, if you do something, then you don't get to learn in this classroom anymore, or you're not going to make it. The whole audition process, this is something that's just come up with a lot of my colleagues. Like, we expect students to audition to study music in college. Why do we require someone to prove that they already know something that they want to learn more about? Like, philosophically, it doesn't make any sense. If you want to learn music, then I should welcome you and we should learn music. Why would I say, no, you're not good enough to learn music? You know, these barriers that we put up, I think, are so frustrating. And all we're ultimately doing is then limiting outcomes. We're limiting perspective.
I totally agree with you, and it's really important to be able to create the space for the students to develop. This is this is our biggest goal, to create the space. I remember I told you when we started about my first day at that school. But the way that I remember it was like a bit like, okay, it was small children, so I mean, 8 to 12 years old. But for me, I sensed it as it was in the Gangster's Paradise, the film. So this is how I that they will not. I mean, you have to gain their trust, because trusting people is not. It's not for granted. So they need to know why they can trust you. And I can tell you that for many years I needed 3 months every year to do that every year. So the first day that I went, I had so many things prepared. It was my first day ever teaching music, like anywhere. And nothing worked. Nothing that I have prepared, really. So I left. I was what I will do. So I had to think of other way. So the second time that I went, I did totally different activities, and I got their attention. I started getting their attention, and everything started working differently. But yeah, we as teachers we need to be open to see the abilities of the students, but to have the connection also with life, and to be able to change, exactly, to have different ways of teaching, different ways, and to be to like active learning, the way that this is being like also in as community music. Sometimes is I'm using a lot of community music when I teach in schools, because I'm also teaching in schools now with this specific population, and I think it's wonderful. It's wonderful way to have them engaged. And also a very important thing when you do music education is creativity to find. That is what we were also doing in the training that we went, is very important. And I saw it also in the schools, that is easier for the children. They feel safer. The children, they don't need so much this time to feel safe, because also it's a school. They already feel it's a safe environment for them. But also in the shelters of unaccompanied refugee minors, is if you do it in a way that is safe, creativity is the quality, the principle that will lead you to develop yourself better. Is very important to be included. Very important to be included in the classes, because it's when the kid or the teenager, or the even at the university, the student, it's when it's them.
Yes.
And they get to do something that it's them, and maybe they didn't know that they can do it.
Oh, Nikoletta, I love this. I am sad because, as I mentioned before we went live, I'm ending a little early today, because for people that are watching, they might already know we're hosting a virtual town hall through the National Association for Music Education, and so I'm going to be switching hats and transitioning over to that live stream. So I'm finishing a little early today, but I cannot thank you enough for your time. And it is coming to 11 p.m. So I'm sure you've had a long day and you want to rest before you start your week tomorrow. But thank you so much. I've put into the chat information about Maxine Green, about Sistema Cyprus, about this new author, Jane Jacobs, which I want to explore. So I put a link to the Center of the Living City, which is an organization affiliated with her work, and then also information about Friede and some websites you can go to explore that. Nikoletta, again, thank you so much, not only for the work you're doing and promoting. I know that it's inspiring people in your community, but I hope that it's inspiring others to use that model. And I know that you are accessible. People can reach out to you through the Systema Cyprus website, not to offer their support, to just connect with you and learn more about what you're doing. Again, thank you for the time. I'm so glad that we got to reconnect, and you'll hear from me again. I want to stay connected with you and learn more about what you're doing. And I just am so excited to hear of the success that you're having and that your students and the community you're experiencing because of the work that you're doing. So thank you again for being here today.
I thank you so much. I had a great time. It was great talking to you again and having this inspiring conversation. Thank you so much.
We will definitely talk again. Thank you all for tuning in. We'll see you next week.
Bye.